Did Pokemon rewire the brains of an entire generation and make them gay? I know this may sound like the worst Thanksgiving rant from your InfoWars uncle, but there's actually some hard data to back this up. I mean, on a base level, we all know that the media we consume shapes us in some way. But if we look at how Pokemon shaped millennials, especially within the context of all the other gaming communities that exist, Pokemon is undoubtedly unique. And with a recent study having confirmed that the game actually did have an impact on millennials' brains, the idea is starting to sound a lot less like the ramblings of an edgy youth pastor, and that there could actually be some truth behind this. So, did Pokemon make me and other millennials gay? Well, today I'll be getting to the bottom of that alongside my friends Marcos Moxie Boosted Perez, Electric Wind Girlfriend, and one of my local queer Pokemon friends, Olivia. But in order to fully address the nuances of this question, we need to start with what Pokemon is at its very core, and how those values may have influenced an entire generation.
Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell for alerts.
Hello internet comrades, welcome to the channel. My name is The Dodd, and as a queer Pokemon player myself, I can personally attest to the fact that the Pokemon community definitely feels different than other communities, especially competitive ones. The community tends to be pretty queer friendly even on a base level. I mean, you can't throw a rock at a competitive event without hitting some member of the Alphabet Mafia, which makes it a hate crime, so don't do that. Why are you throwing rocks in here? For the most part, queer people feel safe attending events, and nearly everyone I talked to echoed something similar.
At least for me, Pokemon is definitely the most welcoming community. Also, something really cool about Pokemon that I think helps it be so accepting is that it's written into the rules. It's both in the community and it's uplifted by Pokemon themselves.
And while there are many reasons as to why people may feel safer here versus other gaming community events, one of the biggest factors is how the community polices itself and chases out bad actors with prejudice. You see, right-wing grifters don't really last long in the Pokemon community. One of the best examples I have is from my own personal experience at San Antonio Regionals. Despite bringing a super fun team with Koraidon, Umbreon, and Scovillain, I still ended up doing just as bad as I normally do. But I still managed to party like I won the whole thing. But in doing so, I was kind of in an act of rebellion. San Antonio Regionals was one of the first events after Trump's re-election. And at that time, it really brought out the sloppiest of MAGA hogs in order to trigger the libs in the best way they could, including Connor Wilson, aka Papa C, as he's known on Twitter, or at least used to be. Now, prior to the regional, he was making quite the name for himself by reposting transphobic racist tweets, this, and even this tweet right here where he talks about trying to skirt the rules and avoid using someone's preferred pronouns if you don't agree with it for religious reasons. And of course, he was also broadcasting that he was planning to attend the San Antonio Regionals, which caused many Pokemon fans, including myself, to report him, even before the event started. And keep in mind, these things included violent threats, all of which pictures were sent in with the reports to Play Pokemon. At the time, Pokemon did nothing, and the friction it caused only charged him up more. He decided to push things by wearing his MAGA hat to the event, which became not only a major talking point at the venue, but really the community at large. It quickly became a lightning rod for all the hateful views and all the violent things he was spewing out online. And given that many of his posts, as I showed you earlier, directly threatened trans players in the community, MAGA really showed their true face here. I myself caught wind of this dude, and of course, after trying to report him even before the event, was kind of perturbed with the lack of action by Play Pokemon, and so I may have bumped into him and accidentally unloaded all of my Gatorade on him. For legal purposes, I spilled my Gatorade on him after he tripped me. That's what happened. But let's just say that's not how everyone interpreted the event. And after word of the incident spread, it became pretty clear where the community stood. Not only did they continue to dogpile this piece of human trash, but even some top players, including multiple regional champions, reached out to me to tell me they thought my actions were pretty based. Not only did the community rally around me, but Play Pokemon also moved quickly to address the issue. So they posted this February 6th, so just about a month after the event happened, but it changed the rules. So while Play Pokemon does not actively monitor member social media accounts for violation, if we're made aware of an online profile that principally engages in the harassment or promotes violent views that threaten other members of community at our events, this can be found as a violation of our policies and can result in disciplinary action. Play Pokemon holds no tolerance for these behaviors, and program members who act in this way, either in person or online, can be immediately removed at our sole discretion, and in severe cases, without the ability to appeal. Pretty clear where they stand on this. I also want to point out here this last bit. Play Pokemon program is dedicated to upholding our values and inclusion and maintain and improve our community spaces as safe and welcoming spaces for everyone. We thank each and every one of you for being a part of our community and lending itself to a version special place it is all. Now, stuff like that seems like just hollow platitudes usually. However, Pokemon as a community kind of has lived up to these values, and I'd argue that they're inherent to Pokemon itself. And just for extra measures, not only did he get blocked, but other transphobic members of the community were blocked as well, and also immediately bullied out of the community, which is exactly how bigots should be treated. They shouldn't be allowed to feel comfortable in what should be queer-friendly spaces. Not at a grassroots level, not a professional level, or really anything associated with Pokemon in general. The Pokestans don't tolerate that shit, and the company itself tends to echo those values, which makes incidents like this few and far between. So while Papa C is an example, the situation as a whole remains a major outlier. And nearly every queer I asked said something similar.
No, it's been great. Welcome with open arms. It's been perfectly accommodating. I know I signed up to NAIC. I was out to some people at that point, but I signed up using my dead name. I didn't realize that. And so I had to day of go and get it changed and everything. And everyone worked TPCI and everything. They were just like, oh yeah, sure. This happens all the time. No worries. And it was not a problem at all. And it got fixed and straightened away.
And again, I would argue this is intrinsic to Pokemon. Pokemon inherently is much more gay than it is homophobic. I mean, not only are there tons of successful queer Pokemon creators, but even Pokemon drag shows. Aspects of Pokemon have been well adopted into queer culture. And while again, my evidence is completely anecdotal, from my personal experience, I would say that Pokemon as a franchise certainly does seem to have more queer members than other games. As a gaming community, it's seen as a lot less toxic than other fandoms. I can only imagine Papa C-like behavior would be more than welcome in a COD lobby. Most gaming communities are more likely to glaze transphobes than condemn them. I mean, it's yet to slow creators like Asmongold down, so the fact that Papa C is treated so differently, is treated with prejudice, is really a good thing and a unique thing. In the Pokemon community, we saw this again in 2024 with Neil VGC, another prominent player who left the scene after transphobic Discord messages were made public after the Orlando Regionals, where he barely lost to Wolfie Glick's Amoonguss. And this not only turned our favorite fungi into a trans rights icon, but it also brought even more of his problematic past into the limelight, including that one time where he posed as an underage girl in order to enter a Rose Tower tournament and gain a competitive advantage. I mean, it's kind of crazy because transphobes are always so worried about trans people ruining women's sports, yet we're the ones that catch them red-handed doing it. And plus, just pretending to be an underage girl and whatnot, there's the catfishing as a child is a little weird, right? That there's something there. And the community had big feelings about it. I mean, Marcos was personal friends with him, and he had this to say.
I think it's in this particular community, it's very hard to find people who support, the exclusion of, trans people, queer people. I think it is difficult to find those people. Yeah, I think that we've been doing a pretty good job of that, all things considered. While there are a very vocal minority of people who will get angry at that sort of thing, not being able to wear their red hat at events, precedent has gone to show that the vast majority of the community is not behind that sort of thing.
It's pretty impressive that Pokemon has been able to maintain such consistency with its communal values, especially when you think about what competitive games are and the unique interactions they create. Think about it for a second. Massive tournaments like NAIC are one of the few places where customers are required to have a confrontational interaction with other customers. Let me explain that. If you and I go to Target, right, we could interact with Target, we could purchase goods, we could do things and not interact with each other at all. We could even go to social places like a bar or something like that, interact with the bar, give the bar money, interact with other people, and still not have to interact and confront each other in some way, shape, or form. However, if we pair up at a Pokemon tournament, we do. We have both bought into being there, right? Competitive atmospheres, and particularly competitive gaming atmospheres, are one of the few places where you have to have this unique interaction. And in order for Pokemon to be able to facilitate that, they have to be able to maintain what those rules of engagement are. When you have these confrontations between two customers, the values that they share at a base level, if I believe that I am somehow more of a human than you, or have more authority or rights or whatever than you, that creates a naturally uncompetitive environment. That's not really fair at a base level. In these competitive environments, both sides have a social agreement that they're going to work together and agree to the rules and play fairly by the rules, and it's up to the organizers to be able to maintain that and uphold it. Otherwise, the customers are the ones that are vilified for the interaction that they paid to be there for. With all of that said, in a world where Asmongold exists, it's kind of wild to think that Pokemon has been able to maintain such an openly queer competitive environment. Even other card games can't say the same. I mean, Pokemon has always been recognized as a woke game, so to speak. Back in the days when I was working for The Gamer, I wrote this article about how Scarlet and Violet may be one of the queerest games that we've ever seen. The progress for Pokemon has always been a straight path, but like, we had tons of things. We had Quackleval and Serena having drag show dance-offs in this one. We had the future as non-binary, with Iron Valiant being a mix of both Gardevoir and Glade. You had all of these various flavors of queer-coded gym leaders, which, I mean, like, queer-coded bad guys dates all the way back to Pokemon's genesis with Jesse and James, for better or worse. One of my favorites is Mousehold. If we look at Mousehold's design, they're supposed to represent a family, but how they chose to represent a family, instead of doing with the cliche gender stereotypes of having, like, a dress and a tie, they just have a top and a bottom. To me, that's a pretty queer way of representing a family, right? And this didn't just start with Scarlet and Violet either. I mean, most legendary Pokemon are considered genderless. And Generation 4, when Azurill was introduced, 1 in 4 of them would actually change gender upon evolution. Now, while this may just be a glitch, for most people, this is confirmation that it is a naturally trans Pokemon. If it is, I mean, that would only echo things that we see in nature with hyenas switching gender roles, or various other species that change gender dependent upon the situation in nature. And while we may not see exactly what happens when you leave 2 Incineroar at the daycare, I can tell you that it doesn't look straight, but we can let just Wolfie's imagination fill in the blanks for you. The story itself includes queer characters in the games, Stephen and Wallace. The fact that homophobes even find their way into Pokemon in the first place is kind of a mystery to me. In fact, I don't really even understand how red-blooded capitalists enjoy Pokemon when it presents itself as a fictional leftist utopia with free healthcare. These things are clearly not for them. With all that said, it's not hard to see the values that Pokemon prioritize and the values that millennials prioritize politically have massive overlap. I mean, study after study has validated that millennials, in particular, seem to embrace progressive ideals more than any other generation. The same ideals that Pokemon seems to promote. Just as an example, the study is a little outdated, but the New Progressive America, one of the most important rises of the strongly progressive millennial generation from 1978 to 2000. I think that's a little broad for millennials. This would have been in 2008, so this is still several years down the line, about 14 or 15 years after the first generation of Pokemon came out. And given that Pokemon landed in millennials' childhood, before they were even capable of forming political opinions, is it possible that this overlap is due to Pokemon's influence? Can a video game really change the politics of an entire generation that drastically? I mean, the idea that video games can influence you is certainly an easy sell to the hogs. The right of attributing any kind of behavior they don't like to violent video games, going all the way back to the Columbine massacre, which conservative parents blamed shooters' obsession with Doom and Mortal Kombat over, I don't know, really loose gun regulations. The idea there that they were saying is that seeing violent actions in video games led to an increased aggression and a desensitization to violence. It is often used to blame mass shootings on anything other than guns. Now, over the years, there have been several studies debunking this, where we can conclude, while a overexposure to violent video games can lead to increased aggression and increased aggressive behavior, there's not a direct correlation with it and an increased desire for real-world violence. And any Overwatch player could tell you that. To top it off, federal crime statistics suggest that serious violent crimes among youth have decreased since 1996, even as video game sales have soared. In fact, there are even studies that have concluded that video games actually have a positive neurological effect. So this article here talks about how video games can help people with anxiety, depression, ADHD, and PTSD be able to effectively manage stress and negative feelings. For me, it's very therapeutic for my ADHD. Video games do have an effect on what we believe and do have effect on us neurologically. But is that enough to shape an entire generation's politics? Well, to answer that, we need to look at how Pokemon shaped us. So alongside the mental health benefits that gaming can provide, we've also seen studies that confirm increased gaming can lead to more political engagement. Thinking about AOC doing Among Us during the 2020 election, Kamala Harris creating their own unique level in Fortnite, you have Trump engaging with several different gaming creators on Twitch during his election cycle, you have Biden, who famously used Animal Crossing as a way to campaign during the coronavirus, and with gaming influencers and Twitch influencers becoming more influential in society in general, naturally, the people who are playing games more are more politically engaged. Now, whether or not these gaming communities are engaged with the Gamergate, conservative, Asmongold type parts of the gamer community, or the kinds of communities that we see in Pokemon, are really shaped by the games themselves and the baseline values, the subtle values, the subconscious values, if you will, that we don't really tend to notice. You see, Pokemon prioritizes diversity in a lot of ways. You have to catch all of the Pokemon in the Pokedex, every single one of them. I mean, gotta catch them all. You gotta fill that Pokedex, right? Beyond that, it's really challenging to get through the game with just one type. I mean, monotype challenges are a challenge for a reason. The game encourages you, it incentivizes you to create a diverse team, all with different options that look different but have different strengths and different abilities in different situations. It also encourages evolution and growth, right? Charmander starts off as Charmander, but then becomes a roaring Charizard by the end of it. Tiny little Larvitar becomes a massive, fearsome Tyranitar by the end of its evolution. Sometimes these evolution even have splitting branches like Gardevoir and Glade, where you have an option to choose which gender route you would like to go to. Beyond that, it's a game that also rewards cultural exploration, which is why so many who travel across the world to participate in these Pokemon tournaments feel like it's kind of an essential part of the Pokemon experience. It feels like a part of Pokemon in general. I mean, I will travel across the land searching far and wide. So when you look at it this way, the values of Pokemon is not just being open to queerness, but being open to all different types of people, all different types of culture. It also doesn't hurt that these were one of the first competitive games that were also portable. It connected people on a level that other games just didn't. It was one of the first games that naturally created communities because it was both a virtual and in-person experience. Same thing happened with its resurgence in 2016 with Pokemon Go and with Pokemon the trading card game. Communities began forming around the core tenets of Pokemon and the values that it incentivizes as a franchise. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, just because these aspects are prioritized in Pokemon doesn't necessarily mean that it changed millennials' minds. Well, I'm glad you asked, because there's actually research that proves that it did just that. Specifically, that Pokemon literally changed millennials' brains. Check out this clip from a Stanford research study.
The people we were looking to scan played a lot of Pokemon in their childhood, so somewhere between 1995 and 1998, they were 5 and 8 years old. These are subjects who can name hundreds of Pokemon, and they have almost lifelong visual experience beginning in childhood with Pokemon. And then the other group of people that we were looking for were people that were the exact opposite. They never played Pokemon, they know nothing about it.
We put them in an fMRI scanner and then show them different kinds of stimuli. So they'll see common stimuli such as faces or places or words or objects, and also they'll be seeing Pokemon stimuli.
The Pokemon region that we observed, it was in high-level visual cortex, the part of the brain that's involved in recognizing things like words and faces. It helps us pinpoint which theory of brain organization might be the most responsible for determining how your visual cortex develops from childhood to adulthood.
Basically looking at them at the central vision, and because they're really small, place them in a particular fold of the brain that we know gets input from the central part of your retina or central vision.
So if you look at Pokemon, they're very small, and you use your central vision, so they land in a part of the center of your retina, whereas stimuli like this room, for example, go to the periphery of your retina. And so because they have different locations on your retina, they have different locations in your brain, and it turns out that the Pokemon region emerges in a part of your brain that responds to information from the center of your retina. And so that finding suggests that the very way that you look at a visual stimulus, like a Pokemon or words, determines why your brain is organized the way it is. And that's useful going forward because it might suggest that visual deficits like dyslexia or face blindness might result simply from the way you look at stimuli.
That's really interesting, and it's awesome to kind of understand more about our brains because of Pokemon. We talk about how this open new neural pathways in the brain, and these expanded areas aren't just storage centers, as we talked about. And Pokemon players that have this region in their brain have better memory recall. Memory recall is kind of like the foundation of being smart. So when I say it rewired millennials' brains, I mean literally rewired them. So this goes beyond just media influence. It's literally causing changes in our body. And many of my friends agree with that too.
I think that Pokemon made me smarter in the sense that I had a thing in my life that I liked to do that had math in it, and I didn't even realize I was doing math. And at a young age, I think that matters a lot more.
Just because it made them smarter doesn't necessarily mean it made them gay, right? And you'd be right to question it because its influence is a lot more specific than that. See, while Pokemon may have changed our brains and allowed us to be more open to different perspectives and cultures, it doesn't really show a preference towards any. It doesn't say like, hey, be gay because that's better. It doesn't condemn any aspects of them, but it just celebrates all cultures for their unique aspects and their differences. Just like you need a team with different types in each category or a broad spectrum of types, everything is simply presented as players and you're encouraged to explore them. In that way, Pokemon is equally about being a cultural nomad than it is about queerness or gender identity. It's about discovery and multiplicity. It's never about one specific agenda. So in reality, if someone is gay, they're simply more likely to discover that about themselves through Pokemon, but the game itself isn't beaming rainbow homo lasers into their brains. And this really makes a lot more sense when you contextualize it with all the media that came out during that time. I mean, we're talking about a series that came out in the late 90s, which was not a good time for queer people. F-words were a part of the everyday conversation, the ongoing AIDS crisis was being actively ignored and treated as God's punishment against queers. Overall, queerness was condemned, shunned. And when queer kids grew up seeing this, it became pretty clear that the safest place for them would be in the closet, that being gay wasn't permissible in their society. This is where Pokemon comes along and becomes a major contrast to the media of the time. Through valuing diversity and encouraging exploration, for some people, it was able to grant them permission to be able to explore this side of themselves, either through the community or simply being exposed to other people's perspectives. So when you put Pokemon in the context of the media during the time, it makes a lot more sense why it became such a natural outlet for many young millennials stuck in the closet. And as the community grew, this radical acceptance snowballed its way into a uniquely queer competitive community.
My name is taken from...
I was going to ask that. Is it from the Elite Four member?
Yes.
Ah, yeah, that's great. That's cool.
It is, and that's like, I mean, it's kind of funny, like how obvious that is, but like, and how well it kind of pushes my point. I think Pokemon as a franchise just leans into the ideas of freedom and of self-expression and allowing you to be who you are. And then also like, you know, trying to change things that are not good and that are not okay, like through, you know, action.
And this is why homophobic hogs have no place in Pokemon. The values of the community are abundantly clear to anyone inside of it. Pokemon fans don't tolerate transphobia, even from their top players. If anyone knows that, it's the 2022 World Champion. You see, when Eduardo Cunha, aka Edu, won the 2022 World Championship, it was a major L for the queer community. Both finalists, Guillermo and Edu, had separate transphobic incidents, but something unique happened after the fact. After Edu won, not only did he face major backlash, but he also changed his perspective. I mean, in a world where Asmongold can be the top streamer on Twitch and say whatever transphobic nonsense he wants, it's a little unexpected for a world champion to really care about what other people think. So I actually got the chance to sit down and ask him about it, and his answers were pretty surprising. Today, I am honored to have a Pokemon World Champion with me, Eduardo Cunha. Hey, thanks so much for being here, man.
No, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited for this video.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about all of this, especially because it was a little bit of a gut punch, I think, for the queer community at the time when we saw who the championship was. Both you and Guillermo had both had an impact on the queer community at the time that wasn't positive. How is your view of transgender people in general, specifically your exposure to them through the Pokemon community? What has that journey been like for you?
First of all, as you said, since the queer community is so present in Pokemon, it's thanks to that presence that I was able to be educated. Since I never really saw it as my problem, I never informed myself. I was just like, okay, it's your thing. It came from me being single and I was never in a relationship. So
Fair enough.
I didn't understand the dynamics, right? How oppressive it can be. But I genuinely think that a good amount of people in that server, like, it was just a cesspool of masculinity because there were only men. So it got messy. Because we were asking these questions and no one knew, and we didn't bother anymore.
I don't think you support any of those actions now, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
So how do we move from that?
One of the biggest changes I made, reflecting about things and being critical. I did these like spiritual, these really quiet trails, with like stuck my own thoughts and challenging myself in other areas and realizing like I can't be like, they can't all be wrong, right? They can't all be wrong. Once I was able to focus on what I did wrong, I was able to identify the problem. Like, I knew I wasn't a hateful person, so why was I saying certain?
Yeah.
What was happening there? And changing that. I didn't even think of the possible consequences. Doesn't mean that it wasn't wrong to say it. And that analysis was really important to me.
How do you feel the franchise itself and what it is at its core shaped your understanding of that?
Pokemon is a lot about connection between Pokemon and people, people and people, Pokemon and Pokemon. So you're always open to talk about who you are, because Pokemon's all about living together between, like, humans and Pokemon living together in harmony. Regardless of who you are, doesn't matter your sexuality, nothing matters, it just matters, only Pokemon matters, right?
Sometimes I get more nervous watching others in situations I've been in than being in those situations, because when you are in those situations, you just focus on playing and that's it. It's your own thing. But when it's others, you're like, you have so much time to think about other things.
You get a personal attachment to their journey too, especially when you have that community. You kind of feel like you've been on that ride, right? And so it helps, I think, generate some level of empathy. I wanted to talk a little bit about everything that went on with Neil VGC. I mean, I remember my feed being flooded with all the Among Us memes, and I started seeing it. And I was like, holy shit, this is a very different reaction than like what was happening and how we felt 2022 was. And so, how did you see the Neil situation? What is your response to that?
So fun fact, one of my best friends is a doctor, and his thesis was on gender dysphoria. So I've been a lot more informed since then. It didn't threaten trans people, so it wasn't like the San Antonio example. But he's doing a lot of harm, like just spreading the misinformation that trans people are all mentally ill is insane. But it comes from, it just feels wrong. It's like saying something wrong. It's like you just don't know, I guess. So it's hard for me to say that he's ill-intentioned without knowing the person, because I don't know Neil. So maybe he's just been like, he hasn't researched, which is his own, as I've learned myself, it's your own responsibility to be informed.
I wanted to give you a chance to respond to the people that, have left the community because of what happened. What would you say to them now?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can really say is that I'm sorry. And it's funny because I told my family that what really hurts is not seeing the people that maybe already disliking me more. What hurts is all the people that are gonna join the game or leave the game, as you just said, and all they know about me is that phase of my life, and that's who I am to them. And knowing that it actually affected some people is like a burden that I'm going to live with for the rest of my life, knowing that I affected some people so negatively. So the only thing I can say is I'm sorry, but I would also like to say that you shouldn't let aggressors, decide how you live your life. Don't give them that power. The most powerful thing you can do in front of aggressors is to keep fighting.
A wise queer once said to being happy and existing in a world that wants to take both of those things from us is the ultimate act of rebellion. I understand that there's probably going to be people that agree or disagree with the decision to sit here and talk about all of this, but if anything, the fact that, the way that you feel about your remarks has changed your perspective, I think speaks volumes for Pokemon as an esport and volumes for the Pokemon community. It's crazy to think that even a world champion, someone who really doesn't have to care about what others think of him, felt compelled to actually change after the community challenged him. I mean, in the world of gaming, world champions are pretty much uncancelable. And in the rare cases they are very quick to yeet themselves into the right-wing manosphere and victimize themselves as if they're Rosie O'Donnell and Dave Chappelle's secret love child. And that brings us to the question at the top of the video. Pokemon, by its very nature, values diversity and prioritizes it, as well as change and growth. While Pokemon without a doubt changed millennials' brains, and even arguably made them smarter, its effect on millennials more has to do with the media that it contrasted with during the time, and the values that Pokemon promotes as a game. The inherent values that Pokemon presents can be conclusively linked to millennials' increased cultural exploration and open-mindedness. And this allowed many people who grew up with the game to discover things within themselves. However, not everyone's convinced that paints the full picture.
And saying that it has to do more with the mechanics of the game that we play is a little bit of a stretch.
And one point in particular kept on coming up when I talked to my friends about this.
Most people that played Pokemon when they were growing up they all went through a period where they kept playing Pokemon. Mm-hmm. And a lot of other people didn't, and they got to that weird age where you're like, 12 years old where people think, oh, I'm an adult now. That's baby shit. I'm not going to mess with that. And so, yeah, you might get made fun of a little bit for playing Pokemon still. At least I did a little bit. It wasn't anything hostile or horrible. It was mostly people just picking on me.
Right.
But I was like, it still messed with me a little bit. I still played it, but I wasn't like talking about it at school with my friends or anything. Because I was like, I feel like if I broadcast this, you know, people are just going to give me shit for it.
Right.
And so everyone kind of goes through that. You get to a point where you're like, I don't give a shit anymore. And so, you know, this is what I like, so I'm just going to keep playing it. And we all got through that at some point, and we're where we are. So it's obviously it's like a different kind of scenario, but it's similar enough. I feel where it's like, okay,
no,
cool.
I think
they're gay or they're trans, whatever. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like,
so based on the general consensus of the community, this appears to be the most critical component in explaining why the Pokemon community is the way it is. There's a bit of ego death with being a Pokemon player. You have to have some level of, I don't give a fuck, when it comes to people's opinions of you. And this is also critical into understanding anything about yourself, especially your sexuality. You need to know where you start and everyone else begins, and you can only do so if you aren't concerned of what other people think about you and how you allow them to shape you. There are so many closeted queer people who remain in the closet because they're too concerned with how they would be perceived if they do. When you let go of that concern, when you let go of other people's perceptions of you, you have that freedom to truly explore that side of yourself. And since playing Pokemon as an adult kind of forces you to let go of that concern, it also forces you to make that first critical step in self-discovery. So, to be clear about the question I asked in the beginning, did Pokemon make me gay? No. That honor belongs to Oberyn Martell, Constantine, and maybe Captain Jack Harkness. But, like so many others, the values that Pokemon prioritize, the community's embracement of diversity, and most importantly, the level of self-acceptance required to play the game in adulthood in the first place, allowed me to receive permission from myself to fully explore my sexuality. So don't worry, Alex Jones, Pokemon isn't going to make your kids gay, but it can certainly help those who are figure that out about themselves and accept it, which is pretty fucking gay if you ask me. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Major thanks to all my guests in this video, Moxie Boosted, Electric Wind Girlfriend, Olivia, and Edu. This channel is completely self-funded, so if you want to show your support, be sure you subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, especially all the way to the end, and we'll see you next time, comrades.